The building didn't look like it had failed. That was the first problem. Facilities that lose control tend to show it. Smoke that doesn't clear, personnel that move too fast or not at all, security that overcompensates. Something always breaks the illusion first. This place hadn't. It sat in the rain, like a decision that had already been justified. Jonas Hale paused under the overhang just long enough to let his eyes adjust to the lighting imbalance between street and structure. The collar of his coat was already turned up, not against the rain so much as against the habit of being seen. The synthweave had outlived its intended lifespan, and then some. The fabric holding on to old repairs the way some people held on to grudges, uneven, functional, and not worth revisiting unless something tore again. Water traced along the seams and found its way inward anyway. He didn't react to it. Discomfort, like most things in the city, had long ago stopped being negotiable. His face didn't catch the light in a way that made it memorable. The angles were there, but softened by time and small, uncorrected damage. Nothing dramatic enough to invite sympathy, nothing clean enough to suggest he'd avoided the usual negotiations. The only thing that held steady were his eyes, moving before the rest of him did, mapping exits and reflections in the same quiet sweep he'd learned from experience rather than training. The lights didn't sync. That meant multiple systems were operating without agreeing on timing. Inside, something was already negotiating with itself. He stepped through the access point without waiting to be invited twice. The air hit him immediately. Burnt insulation, sterilizing foam. The dry metallic edge of overheated circuitry that had been pushed past tolerance and then forced back into compliance. It wasn't fresh. It was managed, like someone had already decided what parts of the smell were allowed to remain. Somewhere deeper in the structure, ventilation turbines shifted pressure with a low mechanical groan that traveled through the walls before fading again. A liaison met him halfway down the entry corridor, mid-level corporate, clean suit, slightly damp at the shoulders from moving between zones too quickly, expression controlled but not calm. "You're Hale." "I am. You've been authorized under compliance review protocol." Hale glanced past him, down the corridor. Doors were cycling, not opening, not closing, cycling, like the system couldn't decide what state they were supposed to be in. "That usually means someone's already decided what happened," Hale said. The liaison didn't disagree. "It means we need a version that holds up." Compliance didn't investigate, it made things agree. "Containment failure?" Hale asked. "Contained," the liaison corrected. "You're here to confirm." "Then you don't need me. We need the report to say that." There it was. Hale nodded once, like the answer had been expected. "Access." The liaison gestured forward. "Limited. You'll find what's relevant." "I usually do." He walked past him without waiting for anything else. The hallway beyond felt warmer than it should have. Not uncomfortable, just slightly elevated, like the environmental systems were compensating for something they weren't allowed to acknowledge. Foam residue clung to the base of the walls in uneven lines, already drying into a brittle film that cracked softly underfoot where it had spread too far. The lighting was dimmed, but not consistently. Panels flickered between levels, brightness shifting just enough to keep the eye from settling. Hale didn't touch anything. He watched. Door panels lit as he approached, then hesitated before granting access. The delay wasn't long enough to trigger alarms, but it was long enough to register disagreement somewhere upstream. He paused at an intersection. 4 corridors, all technically open, none of them inviting. His comm flickered once in his peripheral overlay. "Wisp." She didn't announce herself. She rarely did. The connection came through as a soft distortion in his AR feed, like the image had briefly forgotten how to resolve. "Your access is real," she said. "It just isn't consistent." Hale kept his eyes on the corridor ahead. "Meaning?" "Different systems disagree you're supposed to be here. One of them approved you. The others just haven't caught up yet." That wasn't unusual. It was just earlier than expected. "Can you see why?" A pause. not delay. Processing. Multiple audit layers, she said. They're not referencing each other. Hale exhaled quietly. Two groups writing the same story, differently. That's inefficient, he said. It's temporary, Wisp replied. That was worse. Temporary meant it would resolve. And when systems resolved contradictions, they didn't negotiate. They removed them. Hale moved left. The corridor narrowed slightly, walls reinforced with internal support ribs that made the space feel more like infrastructure than workspace. The smell shifted as he went. Less chemical, more organic underneath. Not rot, not decay. Absence. Like something that had been there wasn't anymore, and the system hadn't finished deciding how to account for it. A relay somewhere overhead clicked twice, paused, then clicked again in a different rhythm. He rounded a corner and stopped. Not because something moved, because something was placed correctly. Karg stood at the far end of the corridor, just off-center from a junction where three paths converged. He wasn't leaning, wasn't braced, just standing in a position that gave him line of sight down each approach without committing fully to any of them. He wasn't guarding the facility. He was positioned where failure was most likely to pass through. He looked up as Hale entered, eyes steady, assessment quick and complete. Not surprised. That meant he'd heard him before seeing him. Up close, the scale of the orc became harder to ignore. Not exaggerated, not theatrical, just present in a way that made the space around him feel like it had already been measured and reduced accordingly. His frame carried weight the way reinforced structures did, not for display, but because failure wasn't an option that had ever been designed into him. The cybernetic work along his arms and shoulders didn't gleam. It dulled the light, worn down to the same functional finish as the rest of him. There were imperfections that hadn't been corrected, a tusk that didn't match the other, old graft lines that hadn't been smoothed out for appearance. Nothing that suggested neglect, just a consistent refusal to waste effort on anything that didn't change outcomes. He didn't reach for anything. Neither did Karg. "Use security?" Hale asked. Karg shook his head once. "No." "Cleanup?" "Depends who's asking. Someone who's not supposed to be here." Karg considered that for a second. "Same," he said. Silence settled between them. Not tense, measured. Hale shifted his weight slightly, enough to signal he wasn't leaving immediately. Up close, the difference between them became clearer, not just in size, but in how they occupied space. Karg occupied the corridor like retreat had already been calculated and rejected. Hale avoided space instead, slipping between lines where decisions hadn't been finalized yet. Karg didn't move to block him. That told Hale something more useful than any answer would have. "You're holding the junction," Hale said. Karg glanced briefly down one of the side corridors, then back. "Until I'm not." "Waiting for something?" "Watching for it." That was as close to an explanation as he was going to get. Hale nodded once, then walked forward. Karg didn't stop him. That was the second useful thing. They moved after that, in parallel. Not together, not separate. Same direction, different intentions. The deeper levels of the facility felt less maintained, not neglected, just lower priority. Equipment hummed behind sealed panels. Workstations sat active without operators. One lab door hung open just enough to suggest it had been closed in a hurry, then reopened later for reasons that hadn't been logged. Inside, the room was clean. Too clean. Surfaces wiped down to uniformity. Tools aligned. Displays still active, cycling through data sets that no longer had anyone assigned to interpret them. Hale stepped in first. The air carried that same faint absence. He moved slowly, eyes scanning for discontinuity rather than damage. There, floor, a shallow indentation where something heavy had rested recently. Not equipment, wrong shape. Too irregular. Surrounding surface cleaner than the rest of the room, like something had been removed and the space corrected around it. "Body," Hale said quietly. Karg stepped in behind him. Looked once, didn't crouch, didn't touch. Moved fast, he said. Before it could be recorded, Hale added. Karg's gaze shifted to the terminal display. Or after it was. Hale followed the line. Data scrolled in quiet loops. Experiment logs, environmental readings, personnel tags. Time stamps didn't line up. Some entries referenced events that hadn't officially happened yet. Others stopped just before they became relevant. Hale felt his calm flicker again. Wisp. They're writing over themselves, she said. Compliance layer just updated. Before or after operations? Hale asked. Both, she said. They're not synchronized. Two systems. Same problem, different solutions. Karg was still watching the room, not the data, the exits. They're going to notice this, Hale said. They already did, Karg said. This is past audit containment threshold. The first sign wasn't visual, it was sound. A shift in the background hum, ventilation adjusting, doors further down the corridor cycling more decisively now, open or closed, no longer undecided. Then the lights dimmed another fraction. Not enough to impair vision, enough to change mood. Hale looked toward the hallway. They're closing the loop, he said. Karg's posture changed slightly. Not aggressive, prepared. This isn't containment, he said. Hale glanced at him. What is it? Karg's eyes stayed on the corridor. Correction. First response layer was already inside the building architecture. 3 of them. Standard formation. Weapons low but ready. Movements coordinated without needing to be called. They weren't searching. They were resolving. Karg didn't step into the open. He shifted just enough to the side to force the corridor to narrow from their perspective. Funnel. Hale moved behind a workstation without being told, not hiding, observing. The response team advanced. First operator cleared the corner. Karg waited. Stillness again, but not passive, contained. The kind that suggested movement had already been calculated and rejected until the exact moment it became necessary. Second operator committed. That was the moment. Karg moved first, and the corridor stopped being useful to anyone else. Fast, direct, no wasted motion, no adjustment mid-action, just execution of something already decided. A piece of loose equipment came up in his hand and went down the corridor, not to hit, but to disrupt timing. The lead operator flinched. That was enough. Karg fired once, not center mass, arm. Weapon dropped. Second shot came before the echo settled. Closer now, center mass. Second operator went down hard. The third hesitated. Just a fraction. Karg closed the distance. Not a rush. Not a charge. A step that removed space. The third operator backed up, trying to re-establish distance. Karg didn't chase. He fired once. The shot forced the retreat deeper instead of outward. Containment. Not pursuit. Silence returned in pieces. Hale watched the bodies, then Karg. You always work like that? He asked. Karg didn't look at him. When it matters, and when it doesn't. Karg reloaded with practiced economy. I don't take the job. The cooling system somewhere above them ramped up another level, fans spinning harder like the building itself had begun compensating for increased strain. The lights dimmed again. Further down the hall, something heavier moved. More steps. More weight. Hale felt wisp again. You're off 2 systems now, she said. Third is updating. How long? He asked. Not long. Karg looked toward the sound. This scales, he said. Hale stepped out from cover. Your access window just closed, Wisp said. You're now in enforcement latency. They moved. Not running. Running suggested panic. This wasn't that. This was timing. The central lab was at the end of the corridor. The door was open. Inside, the truth sat waiting. No breach, no external failure. Containment chambers intact. Monitoring systems active. Logs rewritten. Personnel assignments marked as exposure variables. Hale stepped closer to the main terminal. They didn't lose control, he said. Karg stood at the threshold, watching the hall. No, Hale scrolled. They defined it. Behind them, the sound of the second team reached the corridor. Heavier, less cautious. Karg glanced back once. And now, they're cleaning it, he said. Hale looked at the logs again. Compliance layer, operational layer, same incident, different conclusions. And we're in the middle, he said. Karg met his eyes for the first time. We're not in the middle, he said. A beat. We're the part that doesn't fit. The breach team didn't slow down. Flash first. Karg turned before it hit. Light washed the room. Gunfire followed. Karg fired into the doorway silhouette. One shot, center mass. Recoil compensation keeping the weapon settled. One dropped, another pushed through. Too close. Karg stepped in. Weapon met resistance. He shifted grip. Elbow. Impact. Opponent destabilized. Follow-up shot. Karg closed distance before the man reset his stance. Shot broke the weapon arm. Second shot ended the movement. Clean. No excess. The third tried to flank. Karg didn't pursue. He repositioned, cut the angle, forced the man back out instead of deeper in. Hale moved when the opening appeared. Now, Karg said. They didn't argue. They left. Maintenance corridors, narrow, unlit, smell of old air and insulation. Behind them, the system continued, doors sealing, logs updating, reality stabilizing. Wisp's voice came one last time. They're reconciling, she said. You won't exist in about 30 seconds. Enough time, Hale said. Barely. They reached the exterior access. Rain hit them like something honest. Cold, unfiltered, real. Karg stepped out first, then stopped. Looked back once at the building. Hale joined him. You were hired by them, Hale said. Karg nodded. Different part. Same result. Karg shook his head slightly. Not always. Hale watched the rain run off the structure, lights still flickering, still not in sync. There's a point, Karg said, where the job stops matching the reason it exists. Hale glanced at him. And then? Karg looked back at the city. Neon diffused through rain. Systems layered over systems. You decide if you're still doing the job, he said. A pause. Or just helping it finish. Hale let that sit, then nodded once. Behind them, the building didn't look like it had failed. It looked like it had corrected itself. That was the second problem, because correction didn't mean it was right, just that it would hold until something else stopped fitting.